Kevin, thank you for joining us today and speaking here at the BioHive Life Sciences Summit here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Let's start with learning a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background and where you came from.
Well, thanks, Mark. I'm delighted to be with you. I was born in India. I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and had a chance to live and work in 4 different countries and 4 different industries, including consumer products, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and the last 15, 16 years in medical devices.
Thank you. You know, when you first came in as CEO, you established a mission and value statement, and it goes together with our customer. We are driven to make healthcare better. And you talked about our values of integrity, accountability, how we treat our people, and performance. How do you think this mission statement and values has impacted how we do our business today?
I would say, Mark, that I'm absolutely delighted with the way that the mission and values has taken hold inside of Stryker. It's fundamentally been the way Stryker has been since its founding by Dr. Homer Stryker in 1941. But writing them down was really important as we've become a larger company of 44,000 employees around the world. And it really is the North Star of our company. All of our divisions, regardless of whether you're treating stroke or if you're making a hospital bed, it's all about improving patient lives, improving the experience with our customers. And every division of Stryker has a different personality because we're so decentralized. But the one common across all of Stryker is that mission and those 4 values.
You know, it's amazing. We refer to the mission statement and values all the time, almost at the beginning of every single presentation when we address our team. So it really has given us clear direction and perspective of how we want to behave and how we want to act as a company. So I thank you for that. Stryker's grown dramatically since your time as CEO. I think we're almost double in size. But what's interesting is you've been recognized as a leader who's helped us to become smaller in how we behave internally as we've been becoming larger as a corporation. What's your vision on how we do that and why that's important to us?
Yeah, Stryker's always been a growth company. We've accelerated the growth with a lot of acquisitions, over 50 acquisitions since I've been CEO 9 years ago. And I would say the secret to staying small and nimble is being very decentralized. In fact, we split sales forces, we create separate business units regularly. We now have 22 separate business units across the company. And we try not to be political. We try not to have too many layers. And all my business reviews I travel to the locations to do business reviews and actually attend surgeon conferences and customer visits. And I think that focus on the customer and staying really close to our businesses and staying decentralized is what's made it still feel like a fairly small company. Because if you work in your division, you are very close to the company and you have a customer and you have a lot of autonomy to make whatever decisions you want.
Yeah, it really is a fantastic culture here at Stryker. And I think it is unique how close we stay to the customer and how close we stay to one another, regardless of our size and scale. As CEO, it seems you are every bit about patient care as you are about our P&L. You always start with patient care. You always talk about the products that we make across the spectrum of Stryker and how they benefit patients, even sometimes well before you talk about our financial performance. Why is this such an important aspect of your leadership?
Well, I've always been focused on long-term value. And creating long-term value means if you deliver great results for the patients and for the caregivers, financial results is kind of an outcome. That follows later. One good example is in my very first year as CEO, we did the Mako acquisition, which financially was not seen as a good deal. The investors didn't like it. It was actually dilutive to our P&L, but I knew it was a long-term bet that really I felt would pay off, and really mostly because of increasing patient satisfaction, because there was a lot of dissatisfaction with knee replacement. And obviously, I look back 9 years later, you can say that was a terrific deal. It wasn't obvious at the time. And I think that's the mentality, is if you focus on the patients and you focus on your customers, the financials will be an outcome that will follow later. And if you take a long-term view, you will win over time. And if you're obsessed with quarter after quarter results, I think you make bad decisions and you actually don't provide the kind of value that you should be providing.
Yeah. So when you look at like opportunities like the recent Wright Medical acquisition, You're looking at it financially, but you also know that we're going to expand what Stryker can offer to our customers for patient care. When you're looking at these acquisitions, when you're looking at new technologies, how do you assess them in your mind from what they provide to our customers as well as what they provide to our P&L?
Well, our strategy since the beginning has been really about category leadership. So wherever Stryker plays, we like to be a leader in every single area. And when I became CEO, there were a number of areas that we were not a leader. We were not a leader in spine. We were not a leader in sports medicine. And we were not a leader in extremities. And with the Right Medical acquisition, we became a category leader in both upper extremities, shoulder replacement particularly, and lower extremities like foot and ankle procedures. And to be able to provide a full solution to our hospital customers in the orthopedic service line, you really need to be a leader in all of those categories. So that's been part of the strategy. That was what was so appealing about Right Medical, is that they brought category leadership to the extremities area, which is the fastest growing segment within orthopedics.
Recently, Kevin, you interviewed one of our stroke patients who was treated with devices that were made right here in Salt Lake City for ischemic stroke.
I had no idea what was going on. I went to bed. I was tossing and turning and not going back to sleep. And I looked down at my hand because it felt kind of, well, it didn't feel anything. And it was very heavy. It was like a block. I couldn't move it. And I picked it up and I turned it this way and this way twice. And I said, I'm having a stroke. And that's the last thing I remember for days.
The night before Sandy had her stroke, we spoke before bed, and she and I made a plan to have her drive me to a doctor. I had a procedure the next day. So my appointment was at 11, and I called her at 9:30, no answer, which didn't alarm me because sometimes she doesn't answer the phone or she was busy, and then I called both phones, house and her cell. I called her cousin, who lives across the street, and I said, look, here's what's happening. I don't know, here's the story. And they said, okay, we're going to go over there. So I pull in her driveway. I come into the house. I go upstairs, and there she is on the floor.
I must have tried to get up to use the phone because the phone ended up under the bed. I ended up on the floor.
I knew it was bad. It was a stroke. She was totally paralyzed on one side. Her mouth was drooped. She couldn't talk. Her eyes were not focusing. And the ambulance came. When I first got to Beaver and speaking with the ER doctor, he was very accommodating to Sandy, and I realized then that this was grave. He had the foresight to realize that this was not the place for her. This was not a place where they could help her. He said there's a Dawn study going on in Pittsburgh, and he said, would you like to speak to the people on the phone that are running that study? Well, I don't know Dawn study. Never heard of it. Why would you have to until you're in a situation of having to deal with a stroke?
Sandy arrived at UPMC. She's what we call a wake-up stroke. So a patient who goes to bed normal and wakes up with a neurological deficit, you don't know when the stroke occurred. It could have occurred right after they went to sleep, or it could have occurred right before they woke up. But these patients have been so far excluded from any type of acute stroke treatment. The conventional wisdom, the dogma had been that patients only benefit from treatment if they are within 6 hours of their stroke onset. And in fact, by the time she got to us, time of last seen well was about 18 hours. What we have shown with Dawn is that if you have mismatch, if you still have substantial areas of brain that is still salvageable, then it really doesn't matter how far out you are in time.
We get to UPMC, we find our way to the emergency room, and we meet him, and he says, yeah, she's done. We did the procedure, would you like to see it? And he's demonstrating the procedure.
In Sandy's case, we used the Trevo device, which is a retrievable stent. It's a device that is really a stent attached to a wire, so the stent can be retrieved. Typical access site is the right groin. We thread a small catheter, a small tube called microcatheter that gets through the internal carotid artery deep inside the brain into the vessel called middle cerebral artery, which is where Sandy's occlusion blockage was. The stent is deployed across the clot. We then allow a few minutes for the clot to be sort of enmeshed by the stent. And then we pull the stent that is attached on the wire.
So then he says, well, come on, let's go see her. So we go into the room, and there you are laying there, and he says, Sandy, raise your right hand. And bang, she raised her right hand. Are you kidding me? Unbelievable.
My motivation for my speedy recovery was life, was my football games, my baseball games, my friends, traveling. I was a part of that data that would carry this to the American Heart Association and make it a standard. I appreciate every moment, every step that I climb. I wanted to walk 13 steps to my upstairs and downstairs. It means something different to me now. The things that I do, I don't cheer out loud, but I cheer in my little brain every time I make it up those steps, or because I know now what I lost and got back.
We know from the control group of Dawn, less than 15% of the patients who presented like Sandy were able to not go back to normal or near normal, but to actually be independent, have a good outcome. Most of the patients that were not treated with thrombectomy in Dawn ended up with dependence as a sequelae of this event. In Sandy's case, she recovered in the hospital to a very good condition at discharge, and over the ensuing few months, those relatively small or minor deficits that she still had kind of disappeared, up to the point where now she is able to do everything she was doing before the stroke.
It was just nice to be back doing what I did before my stroke, and it was a month. And that blows my mind, that a month later I was here just like before. And the away game meant a lot to me too, but home meant everything. It was kind of a signal to me that I was going to be okay, that I was going to do everything I'd ever done. And this was my proof that I would fully recuperate. I appreciate every one of those people more than I have the words to say, because they gave me my life back and restored my ability to live. And I wish I knew their names, all of them, because I would write them a letter. Because I think they don't know that from people, because you go in, you're sick, you get better, and you go on with your life. But those people will forever be part of my life. And I appreciate all of their efforts, everything that they did for me.
How is it important when you meet these patients, when you think about our procedures, when you think about the outcomes, And how do you apply that back to our culture of what we do every day at Stryker?
Yeah, to me, it's always about the patient and the caregivers. Many of our products also in our med-surg segment help protect nurses as well as EMTs. So we actually provide value also to the caregivers, but ultimately it's about the patient. And I love being able to connect with patients directly to hear about the value that our products provide. In this case, it was a life-saving product, which are made in Salt Lake City with our neurovascular business, which has been our fastest growing business of Stryker over the last decade. It's just heartwarming to hear the stories, and it really makes sure that we focus on the right solutions for the long term. And if it requires investment, if it requires clinical trials, if it requires risk taking to develop those products, it gives us the courage to do so when you actually meet the end patient. It's incredibly satisfying. Every leadership team meeting that I have with a large group of Stryker people, we always include a patient story to make sure people are connected with the mission of our company.
Yeah, it's fantastic. At each of your global leadership team meetings, you always have a patient, you always have an associated technology, and you always have the physician there. And so for each of us across the spectrum of all of our divisions, it's fascinating and such a powerful part of our culture when we listen to the doctor, when we listen to our team, and when we listen to that patient and how their lives have been helped or changed or even saved. It's an amazing experience to be a part of Stryker. Well, let's shift gears a little bit to Stryker Neurovascular and our growing presence here in Salt Lake City, Utah. We established and built a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility here in Salt Lake City. You've been here, as well as we've built a state-of-the-art learning center for all of our surgeons across the spectrum, as well as training our internal people. What initially guided us to choose Salt Lake City, and now we're choosing to expand Salt Lake City? What was some of the rationale for putting a presence here?
Well, first, Mark, I want to give you personal credit because you kind of put Salt Lake City into our mind frame. It's not for us an area that we were as familiar with. You obviously are from there, and you have good roots there. But frankly, the BioHive was not something I was as aware of. And I am delighted that we have chosen Salt Lake City to have a real beachhead for Stryker. Even the training center was initially supposed to be a neurovascular training center, and you had the vision to expand that to become a Stryker-wide training center. And the Salt Lake City location is spectacular. Not only is it beautiful, the airport is very convenient. It's a hub, and this location is close to the airport. So for surgeons traveling in, it's super convenient. The hotels are terrific, the lodging, the accommodations, food, everything. Everyone who goes there has a very positive experience. At least that's what I've been told by many, many surgeons who have gone. And also creating a manufacturing hub there for our neurovascular division has been a great decision. We already have close to 500 employees, and we plan to double that in the near future. And knowing now that there are so many other med tech companies within the BioHive, it is great for us to be a part of that, to be part of such a vibrant and growing med tech community.
Yeah, for sure. I remember your first visit here, and the windows face the east, and you can see the entire Wasatch front. And you looked over at me and you said, "There's nowhere in Stryker where we have a facility that has this view. This has to be the best view in all of Stryker." So I've repeated that story many times. You've also worked closely with FDA, with CMS, and other regulatory bodies around the world. When you think about your vision of the future for the life sciences industry, whether it be here in Salt Lake City with the BioHive and across Utah or across the world, what's your vision of our future in life sciences? Do you see continued expansion? Do you see challenges, or do you see opportunities?
I start off with opportunities. If you think about in med tech in particular, the opportunities for innovation are just immense. The digital component of innovation, the product components of innovation. And frankly, if you look back a decade ago, I was somewhat worried. I was worried about the FDA. The FDA had been very, very strict in the United States, and innovations were starting to happen in Europe before the United States. And that's kind of changed. I've been delighted with the progress that we've made with FDA. We now have a new process for approving products called de novo products, and neurovascular was the first division within Stryker to have a de novo product. But more recently, we have a product for shoulder and a sports arthroscopy called the InSpace balloon for large rotator cuff repair. That was a de novo as well. We have so a great relationship now with FDA to get products approved. the ecosystem has become very healthy over the last 4 years. So venture capital funding had kind of started to move away with the FDA's conservatism. As the FDA has improved with its process, we've seen more money flow in, venture capital money flow into medtech. And if you look at the IPO market right now in medtech, it's incredible. We've had probably a dozen companies go IPO just in the last year alone. And so that's making a thriving ecosystem, because my vision is really to have more innovation and more access to patients globally. And the regulatory pathway of having a single audit program across different geographies, that's a new concept where regulators around the world are starting to collaborate. That's exciting. Still have work to do on the reimbursement pathway. That's always still a challenge, whether it's CMS for the government provided healthcare or even the private payers. That's still something that we need to continue to work on. But I'm very bullish about the future of innovation within the medical technology industry.
It is exciting. When you, with your visionary view of robotics and digital and artificial intelligence, do you see the regulatory agencies and CMS and other notified bodies keeping track with the pace of development in those areas, or is that going to take some time for them to catch up?
5 years ago, I would have said I was worried about that, but they're engaging with us like never before. Even on 3D printing, as an example, we brought the FDA to our facilities. We were one of the first companies to launch 3D printed interbody devices. And they came and visited our facilities, and they've been terrific in terms of improving 3D printing products. Digital, they've created within the FDA a branch on digital, and we've been engaging with them directly. So I do believe they're going to keep pace, and this is not going to be an area that'll thwart innovation.
Yeah. Let me ask you one small question on COVID. It's still with us, but share a little bit of your thoughts of what some of our divisions did during this time to help patients and to help our physicians care for those patients around the world.
Yeah, I'm really delighted with the way our team stepped forward, not only to protect our own employees, but we continue to have roughly half of our employees either going into hospitals every day or going into our manufacturing facilities every day to provide support to our customers. And we also provided some new innovations. We had a low-cost bed that we were able to assemble and manufacture, which we never even had within our portfolio. A cover that would cover the patient if they were on an ambulance. Again, designed specifically for COVID to protect the caregiver from being close to the patient. And so these types of innovations have, we're not sure that we're going to have those long-term, but they were provided during the pandemic to really aid with the protection of our caregivers and to provide more capacity, because beds were there was a shortage of beds globally. And then as COVID started to recede, we had a surplus of these beds, and we ended up donating them to charities. So I'm really delighted with the way our team stepped up in the face of this tremendous pandemic.
It was. I remember your first messages was we have to keep everyone safe, we have to keep product flowing, and we have to support our physicians as they take care of their patients. Right. And we use that as our mantra across all of our divisions and all of our countries across Stryker. So Kevin, lastly, with your experience as a very successful CEO, your time at J&J, your time as chairman of AdvaMed, when you look at the BioHive life science community here in Salt Lake City and across Utah, what advice would you give the BioHive as a collective group of life science companies, from pharma, from diagnostics to bio to medtech and all the companies that support us? What advice and counsel would you give us?
Listen, you've done an amazing job. You're the fastest growing life science corridor within the entire United States. I would say keep doing what you're doing, but I would tell your story more aggressively. Promote yourself even more than you have in the past. Make sure that the summit like you're having right now is as vibrant as possible, with as much cross-functional and cross-discipline groups as you can get. I know you do that already today, but even bringing in hospitals or bringing in payers, or the broader that you can be in your approach to include venture capitalists and bankers and CEOs and startups, and the more mixed that you have, the more exciting it becomes, and the more awareness people have of the strengths of your community and the strengths of the BioHive, which are plentiful. And I think success breeds success. And so the fact that you are the fastest growing, I don't know if everybody knows that. And I think having that promotion out there, leaning in, not being too humble, that would be the only advice I would give you. But you're already in a position of strength, and I think you just need to build upon that strength.
Thank you. I agree. When we were looking at building the facility here, when we looked at all the pieces were here, You have both sterilizing companies here. You have the Delta Hub Airlines. You have low-cost manufacturing facilities. You have a population base, which are fantastic employees, and they follow rules, and which we really need in life sciences communities, especially when it comes to manufacturing. And you have 6 universities that surround the valley here. And so, and you have a low cost of living or moderate cost of living community. So when you put all those ingredients together, and you look at the University of Utah and all the medical systems that are provided up there, you look at Intermountain Health, one of the largest and most successful, privately run organizations in the United States. It's just a fantastic opportunity to have all those in one community. And I think that's why BioHive is succeeding so well.
I agree, 100%.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for the time today. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for being such a wonderful leader for our organization. And we thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mark, and have a great summit.
Thank you.